Hi, everyone. And it's kind of weird today. You see two of me. You can see what is really happening in the background and what is not actually happening in the background. But let's kind of dig into it. Today, I want to talk about some things that have been on my mind more recently. And that topic is picking an enemy. And well, what do I mean by that? Well, in marketing, a lot of people often focus on the customer acquisition channels, like should you use ads or outbound sales, like writing cold emails or whatnot. And occasionally people say, well, I've tried all these channels, but my copy's just not working. And then it's really hard to know, is it because your copy sucks or is it because people don't actually want your product? So today, I don't normally talk about content or copy, but I want to dig into that a bit because I think it's often challenging for people like myself. Like, I don't have a liberal arts degree or background in writing and I'm not a particularly creative person or anything. So how is it that as someone who is a non-writer, how do you actually come up with good copy? And I think one technique that has been really helpful to me over the years is just this concept of picking an enemy. That is one of the easiest ways to come up with great creative without actually putting a lot of thought into it. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I think in marketing, you have to attract attention. Even if you have an amazing thing that everybody wants, like everybody these days, we're all so distracted by so many things. We have no time to do anything. How do you capture somebody's attention? And one of the best ways is by saying something controversial, by picking an enemy. And I'm going to go through a few examples today of companies that I think who have picked an enemy quite well. And I was actually inspired to think about this by one of my portfolio companies, Parrotmob, and I'll talk about why. So why don't we actually stop sharing two of me and let's kind of dig into it. So I'm just going to screen share here. Let's see. Screen share here. All right, here you go. You can see hopefully just one of me. I'm not really sure what you see. Maybe you still see two of me. And you can also see here my browser. Now, one of the founders of Hustle, not one of the founders of Hustle, one of the founders we backed at Hustle Fund, Osagaius, who runs a company called Parrotmob, recently put out an interview this past week that I thought was really good. And if you haven't read it yet, I'm going to go ahead and share the link also, so that way you will be able to read it. I think it's definitely worth a read. In this post, he interviews Heidi Zak, who's the CEO and co-founder of Third Love, and also a good friend of mine. And so the two of them have this interview, and I read this interview, and I thought it was a fantastic interview, and it also inspired me to do this video because I think there's some key points in here that I really want to extrapolate on, and that is in picking an enemy. But first off, you can see here, let's talk about this interview at a high level. One of the things is that even though I have a marketing background, I have always learned so much, like all these tidbits over the years from Heidi, actually. Heidi is a phenomenal marketer and has a lot of good insights and tidbits. Just in general, after you finish reading this post, I would highly recommend actually just following her and looking up everything that she said and written about, because I think you will learn some other things as well. Third Love is a company that sells personalized bras, and I think they're doing over 100 million a year in revenue now. So definitely check out that company, even if you are not a prospective customer because you don't wear a bra. I think it's a phenomenal company to follow and look at what they're doing. Now, in this article, there was something that was very interesting to me that really stood out and sparked some ideas. So in fact, it just starts out in this beginning of this post. In 2012, Heidi was trying to figure out, she had 12 bras and none of them really fit perfectly. And Victoria's Secret, who was the market leader at the time, had their own messaging, which is essentially like if you want to be a woman who is attractive to men, you should buy our bras. That was essentially their messaging. What Third Love has done that I think is really clever is they have picked an enemy, and their enemy essentially is Victoria's Secret. And basically, their messaging is entirely about, we are the exact opposite of Victoria's Secret. Don't try to be attractive to men, like try to be attractive to yourself and do you. You do you. And that is the exact opposite message that Victoria's Secret is coming out with. So everything that you'll see from Third Love about is like focusing in on picking the enemy. And Heidi even talks about this in this article here. Let me see if I can pull it out. Because she talks about some of the early days and how they came up with their copy. So let me see if I can find it. Yes, here we go. In this article, she says, you know, just saying that a Third Love bra is more comfortable on a Facebook ad wouldn't work. Our target market didn't know if that was true or not. At the start, our best ads had messages like, are you ready to graduate from Victoria's Secret? And that attracted curiosity. So I want to pause right there for a moment. Let's just think about that. Ultimately, the value proposition has nothing to do with Victoria's Secret. The value proposition has to do with this bra fits you better than anything else. It's a personalized bra. That's really hard to convey in an ad, and frankly speaking, doesn't really capture attention. But what does capture attention here is picking an enemy, and that enemy here is Victoria's Secret. And that is everything that they do to really stand out and, you know, get strong clicks. So let's kind of actually go to the next tab, and you can see here, this is an example of a campaign that they did. They took out a full-fledged open letter to Victoria's Secret in the New York Times, you can see here. And essentially calling out Victoria's Secret for things that they have said in the past. So we attempted to do a television show for plus sizes. No one had any interest in it and still don't. And this is essentially what Third Love hones in on and just attacks and is like, hey, you guys are really not inclusive at all. We are an inclusive bra brand. Now remember, keep in mind, the ultimate value proposition here is customized bras. It actually has nothing to do with being in, you know, who is in and who's out. But what they're basically doing is making this about, if you are going after this sector, we are going to say, actually, we're going to be the exact opposite. That is called picking an enemy. Let's go into other examples here. You know, Salesforce is another great example of this. And over the years, you know, one of the things that they've really honed in on in their campaigns is this concept of no software. And one of the things that they did was, you know, as you can see in this picture here, they have this person walking around in a no software costume and people, quote, protesting. Now, what is interesting about this is that it is obvious to all of us that Salesforce is a software product. It is software as a service. But, you know, back then when they first launched, it was very different from, you know, taking the old CDs that you put into your desktop and, you know, run locally, etc. It was very different. And so their enemy, picking their enemy was like, we do not do that. We are not desktop software. We are in the cloud software. And that was unique, and that was picking an enemy. And so you can do that with anything. I mean, the inclusive, exclusive angle is something you can do for a lot of different realms. And I'll show you another example in a second. And, you know, you can do something like this, like whether it's, we don't live on your desktop, we are in the cloud. So whatever it is that a market leader is doing, are you doing the exact opposite? And it may be that you are, because usually when you're going after an opportunity, it's because there's a gap in the market, that someone is doing something and missing this other area, and that is what you're going after, and that's an opportunity. So almost by definition, if you're seeking an opportunity, it's probably because inherently you've already picked an enemy. All right, let's move on to another set of quick examples. I have two more. So this one is a Rolex ad. And by the way, I actually sign up for a lot of newsletters because I want to see people's ads. I would actually highly recommend doing this, like create an email account just for getting newsletter ads. And it is actually really helpful to see what is it other people are doing. You can start to calibrate, like what is a good ad and what is not. What is good copy and what is not. What really stands out for you? What do you ignore? So anyway, if you look at this Rolex ad here, it says, we invented the submariner to work perfectly 660 feet under the sea. It seems to work pretty well at any level. And then if you scroll down here, when a man has a world in his hands, you can expect to find a Rolex on his wrist. So what does that tell me? You know, that actually is, so we talked about inclusive themes with Third Love. This is an example of an exclusive theme, where it's like, actually, we are not trying to sell this watch to everyone. We are not Casio. We only want to sell this watch to people who have very high taste, as you can kind of see from this glass, this wine glass here, and somebody who has the world in his hands, a man actually specifically. And so what you garner from here is people who believe they're in this exclusive club. That's who we want to sell to. So they're picking an enemy. They don't explicitly pick a company as an enemy, but they are picking an enemy here, and that enemy is for the masses. Now, if you were to come up with a watch brand, you may say the exact opposite. You may attack Rolex and say they are not inclusive. They do not include women. You know, they are too overpriced. They are not accessible, right? Like you can come up with any messaging that somebody else has done. You can come up with the exact opposite. That's what I mean by picking an enemy. And I would even say, like as an anecdote for Hustle Fund, you may or may not realize that in our copy and in our marketing, but we pick an enemy as well, right? We often make fun of VCs. We often say we don't like things that VCs do. Well, we are a VC. Like it's almost as ridiculous as Salesforce saying that they're anti-software, right? But you get the point of the message we are trying to create, which is these other VCs have traditionally targeted these kinds of founders. We believe that everybody who hustles ought to be able to get access to resources. We want everybody who thinks of themselves as a hustler and maybe even an underdog with our messaging to come to us. So you can see, like for anything you do, you can always pick an enemy, whether it's an inclusive or exclusive theme. And neither is good or bad, like, right? Like in the Rolex theme, like I don't think it's bad that they're selling an exclusive product. Or like, you know, if it's a new technology, like cloud versus desktop or something along those lines. So I'd encourage you to kind of think about this as you write your copy, like who is your enemy, and just like be bold, go after them. You can even call them out, like Victoria's Secret, what the heck. So that is my several minute spiel today on marketing copy and how you can easily come up with more interesting copy that people will read. All right, take care.